Vibrato is a very personal addition to someone's sound and a great way to colour a phrase to make it sound more interesting. So first of all, what actually is vibrato? Well, vibrato is actually the slight pitch movement of a note either side of where it is in tune. If this is where our note is in tune, then vibrato sends the pitch just slightly higher and lower of that line. In saxophone playing, I would tend to say that the pitch only goes slightly higher but a little bit further down than where it sits in tune. So I would say that vibrato tends to look a little bit more like this. And the way that we change that pitch is by a slight movement of the jaw, either by applying pressure on the reed or by dropping that jaw away from the mouthpiece. Now, one of the reasons why I think that we don't tend to send the pitch much higher than where it sits in tune is if we add too much pressure on that reed, we're going to thin the sound out. So it's much easier for us as saxophone players to relax that bottom jaw and move that bottom jaw away from the mouthpiece, which is going to send the pitch lower. There are a few things that we can do to become more comfortable with the jaw movement that's needed. The first thing I suggest that you try and do is hold a long note and just move your jaw very slowly until the pitch starts to move. And I would say move your jaw away from the mouthpiece. This is going to be an easier movement than moving your jaw to putting pressure on the reed and moving that jaw upwards. One thing that you'll need to make sure that you have all the way through this exercise is a really good strong embouchure, because without that you're going to risk losing the note altogether. And once you start to hear that pitch movement, see how far you can actually move your jaw until you lose the note altogether. And hopefully you will have sent that note quite a long way flat. And if you've got that movement, you can control that movement from in tune, possibly slightly higher than in tune, but certainly a little bit further flat. Now it's time to try and control that movement in a more rhythmical way. So set your metronome to 60 beats per minute and play a long note and try to match the undulations with a rhythm. Now, an undulation is one full cycle of vibrato. So it's from here to here. What I would tend to do is try and hit the bottom of the note in a more rhythmical way. The best thing to do is to listen to it. So here are some examples. Once you've done that, you can then start to mix up these rhythms to practice turning that vibrato on and off. If you would like a worksheet that takes you through these steps and gives you a few examples, then all you have to do is go to my website, enter your email address under the vibrato section in the educational materials page, and you'll receive an email with that worksheet attached. For those who are already members of my mailing list, what I'm going to do is start sending out more regular emails with this material attached to it, mainly so you won't miss out. So I'll attach the new video and new materials to that email. So once you have that rhythmical control over the vibrato, it's now time to figure out how we can be a little bit more fluid with it and a little bit more expressive with our use of it. One way I try and incorporate all of the different speeds of vibrato is by imagining a ball rolling down one side of the valley and then up the other side of a valley. So if you think of a ball traveling down a hill, it gets faster and faster and faster and faster until it reaches the bottom of the valley. With its momentum, it starts to move up the other side of the valley, and as it moves up the hill, it starts to slow down. So you get this sort of sound. Now, there are some very specific approaches to vibrato, depending on the genre of music that you're playing. Now, generally in classical saxophone music, you would be expected to have a consistent and regular vibrato. Just go and have a listen to someone like Marcel Mule or Daniel Defaye as an example of classical saxophone playing from around the mid-20th century. That way of playing has actually been adopted by the great classical saxophone players of today, such as Jérôme Laurent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link you to some examples of these players so you can hear it for yourself. Just check them out in the description below. On the contrary, when we're playing jazz, funk or pop music, the vibrato can tend to be a little bit more wild and a little bit more free, and it can vary quite widely depending on the player that's playing it. Just listen to someone like Lester Young or Coleman Hawkins just to hear how fast the undulations are, and compare that with someone like Dexter Gordon. Again, I'm going to link these all in the description below, and I'm going to try and use specific examples that you can compare quite closely, and you can hear the different approaches to this vibrato. So the best thing to do is copy. Listen to the players that you enjoy listening to and see what they do. Listen out for how are they using the vibrato. Are they using quite wide undulations, or is it quite shallow? Is it quite subtle? Do they set it going and it's either an on or off, or do they start with wide undulations and it gets shallower and shallower? It's totally up to you how you play vibrato. It's a very, very personal approach. I treat it a little bit like an accent. We all speak a certain language, but we all speak in slightly different ways. So our accent on the instrument could be seen as the way that we use vibrato. I tend to use slightly less vibrato when I'm playing classical music on my classical mouthpiece and reed setup, and I would tend to play slightly more with my jazz setup. Now, if you're wondering what I'm on about with these different setups, a setup is just a different mouthpiece and reed combination, sometimes ligature combination. And look out for a video coming up, because I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, why I have two different options of mouthpieces depending on the music that I'm playing. It's quite an interesting topic, and one that comes up quite a lot because players often wonder whether they need to buy a second mouthpiece to be able to play different styles of music. So specific uses of vibrato, I would say when working on solo repertoire or a section of chamber music where you have a solo line, then it's up to you. You have the license then to add your personal touch by using your vibrato, and everybody's going to have a different interpretation of how they're going to use vibrato. But you should make specific decisions. When are you going to start that vibrato, and how shallow or how wide are those undulations going to be? When is it going to start to fade away? Is it going to be in your face all the way through? Those are decisions that you need to make on the music that you're playing. Vibrato doesn't tend to be used when we're playing in unison, and the reason for that is if we're adjusting the pitch of a note and we're playing the same pitch, if we're not lining that up, then it's just going to sound like the note's out of tune. Saying that, we can add some vibrato to a chord. So if you're playing in a sax quartet or a saxophone group, then you can decide on how much vibrato you're using as a group, and it can often add a nice shimmer and a nice colour to certain harmonies and certain sounds that we're playing. So there you go, there's just a quick video on vibrato, how you should listen out for it, how you can incorporate it into your own playing, and some general rules on when you should and maybe shouldn't be using it. If you've enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. I'm going to be making these more regularly over the next coming weeks and months, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks very much.